This show talks about books that feature mental health and mental illness topics. There are many books that include this topic, and my hope is that more and more people know about them because they help to decrease the stigma and help people not feel so alone in their struggle. I am your host, Robin Tamanaha. Joining me on this episode is my guest, Kathleen Burkinshaw. Kathleen is a Japanese-American author, the daughter of a Hiroshima survivor, and resides in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is a wife, mom, and owns a dog who thinks she's a kitchen ninja. In 2019, Kathleen spoke about her mother's experience in Hiroshima at the United Nations and on UN virtual events for the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombing. She most recently spoke at a Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum virtual event in February. Kathleen has presented to middle, high schools around the world for the past 10 years. She now serves on the advisory council at the International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma. She has also been featured as a guest on NHK World Japan, Asian American magazines, and on numerous podcasts. Writing gives her an outlet for her daily struggle with chronic pain from reflex sympathetic dystrophy. The Last Cherry Blossom is now a United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs Resource for teachers and students, nominated for 2019 NC School Library and Media Association YA Book Award, 2019 to 2020 Volunteer State Book Award, 2018 and 2016 Scholastic WNDB Reading Club Selection, and finalist for NC Sir Walter Raleigh Fiction Award, 2018 Sakura Medal, Japan, and SCBWI Crystal Kite Award. The Last Cherry Blossom audiobook, released in September 2021, will also be the written Japanese translation of The Last Cherry Blossom in November 2022. The audiobook version of The Last Cherry Blossom will be released, was released September 27th, 2021.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I might have had you giving you an earlier bio. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Hi, Kathleen.
Hello.
How are you?
I am hanging in there. It's been a rough few months, but I'm really excited to be able to discuss some things with you that we had wanted to do a few months ago, and then I couldn't do it. So this is wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this. Like when I initially reached out to have you on the guest and you responded that you wanted to, I was so excited because I read your book last year, so 2021, and it was like so amazing, and so such a fan. And I know one of the things we talked about before also was our different, to know your mother, survived, the bombing, and my family was the other experience with the internment camp. So I thought, oh, this is fascinating, So first, though, we'll get into some stuff. But first, can you tell the listeners or the viewers kind of a little bit about The Last Cherry Blossom so they know what the book's kind of about?
Sure. In The Last Cherry Blossom, it really takes place over the last year of my mother's family life, living in Hiroshima during the last year of World War II. And as it leads up to the atomic bombing and then what happens in the next couple of months. The book was originally written because a lot of schools actually requested that there be some information out there. So what I thought I'd do is to really kind of show this, to make an emotional impact, more so than what you got 2 paragraphs and like a picture of that famous mushroom cloud in a textbook. And so I wanted to write something that talked about the culture, that would give them a way to see what the political society, how they saw things in government, which was different from the Allied countries. Because I also feel if you show their customs, it's kind of like an unwritten dialogue to really get to the heart of the people, to see what matters to them. And I thought that would be helpful to also then show what she had lost as part of that as well. And I also feel now that when it's read in schools, it can kind of also give that same message where the Japanese children, like my mom, they loved their family and they loved their friends. They worried what would happen during the war. And then they wished for peace. And that's everything that the Allied children were thinking and wishing. And in that same respect, they could then look at in the modern world where we are today, that, the ones that we think don't belong or are different or the enemy, they're not really so different from ourselves. And I really hope that that helps to bring some kind of emotional connection while also kind of introducing you to the Japanese life during World War II.
Yeah. As a reader, I definitely felt that, for sure. And like that intention that you had, because like I said, like I didn't know too much of those in Japan, like their experience. I only know like here. And I just remember feeling that, like all those things that you had described and how amazing that was. So I have so many questions. And for you, it sounds like like your mother, had, she survived it. So how did that I guess how did that not only like inform the book, but then also like even generationally, like kind of what that looked like?
Sure, sure. It's really interesting because it does involve my daughter, the third generation, with it. Because the whole journey really started with her in seventh grade. And that was like almost 12 years ago now. But she had come home from school. They finished World War II. And she said she overheard these kids talking about the cool mushroom cloud. And she was so sad. She wanted me to go talk about the people who were under those mushroom clouds, like her grandmother. And that's really what started it, because I never spoke about it in public before. So I had to call my mom to ask her. And in fact, growing up until the age of 11, I thought she was from Tokyo because that's what she told everyone. And I remember she'd have nightmares throughout the year, but August was really bad. And so that particular summer, I had remembered the previous August was also bad. So I kept asking her, did something happen in August? Why? And she finally said that she was born in Hiroshima, not Tokyo, but she lost everything on August 6th to the atomic bomb. And of course, being 11, she didn't want to go into it, but she also said, I can't talk about it yet. It's still too painful. And then she said, don't tell anyone. And so there really wasn't much said. And I didn't even really know what she may have gone through until I was in high school. We read the book Hiroshima by John Hersey. And that was really the first time I got any inkling of what those nightmares were. And I remember going to her with the book and I said, was it this bad? And she said, she shoved the book aside and she says, no book could really explain how awful it was. And then she said, please don't tell your teacher. I still cannot talk about it. And so I really didn't do much with it at all until I was 31. I was very ill and I was in the hospital for over a month. And when I got home, I needed some help for taking care of me. And my daughter was 4 then. So my husband worked during the day. And so my parents came over. I also received the diagnosis of reflex sympathetic dystrophy at that time. And it is a chronic neurological pain disease that affects the sympathetic nervous system as well as your immune system. And the doctors, when they diagnosed me, stated that my immune system deficiencies, because of my mother being exposed to the radiation of the atomic bombing, opened up for me to be able to have this illness, which it's progressive. And at that time, I couldn't walk on my own and I knew it could get worse the older I got. And I just remember being so depressed and despondent because I had to give up a career that I had worked so hard for. And then, my daughter was 4. How was I going to be able to keep going and helping her at such a young age? And my mother started to talk to me about Hiroshima. Now, she told me fun, loving stories, years ago, but for that time, she started to talk about August 6th and what she experienced, what happened after. And then she told me that she wanted me to know this because she thought of committing suicide. And she's so glad that she didn't because she had me and she had my daughter to love. And so I had that same strength in my blood flowing through me. And then I'd be able to find my own new way because of that. And so I'm very grateful, not to the illness, but for the opportunity for her to also be able to tell me, because a lot of the memories she didn't even tell my father. She didn't talk about it to anyone really. And so that she would open up like that. I guess that's like a mom. You're trying to protect your child. It doesn't matter how old your child is at the time. And it really helped me to tell myself, okay, I can try to push forward. I can go through the grueling PT. I can, try to do that. But I really didn't do anything with that because she still wasn't ready for it to go public. It was just to help me. And so that day when I called, I really thought she was going to say no because she was very private with it. But she shocked me. She said, I think it's time. And she said, all those kids will be about my age that I was. She was 12 and a half. And she said, so they might relate to stuff going on in my life and see me as a person. And they're all going to vote someday. So they'll walk away knowing nuclear weapons should never be used again. And it was a wonderful gift that I was then able to talk about her story with the students at my daughter's school. And after that, the next year, the new seventh graders, they had me come in to speak to, and then other schools, and then at that point, they all wondered, well, could we have something? Because they didn't have anything on the Pacific side of the war. And I remember I called my mom and I told her about that. And I said, I think I'm going to take the note and I'm going to do a book for it. And she said, I'm so surprised that anyone would care about a little girl in Hiroshima. And that week, she sent me a copy of a photo. Can I just show it to you real quick?
Yeah.
It is this one of my mom and her papa. And this photo had a special place of honor in our home growing up. And now it's in a place, my home. It was very special because she had 7 photographs from her childhood. They were all of the ages between 3 and 5. Any of her more current ones were destroyed with the home that day. Those photos happened to be at somebody else's house, so she was able to reclaim those. And her papa, as you probably got from reading the book, meant the world to her, was her favorite person. And she loved him very much, but I could tell he also loved her very much. So I realized that she had more than just August 6th in her life. She had some happy and loving memories. And so that's what then led me to do the book in the way that I had done it, because I really felt it would help to make her more, to show the humanity, I guess, is basically what I wanted to do, because you can't get that from a textbook. You can't get that from speeches about why we shouldn't have nuclear weapons. You need to know the stories, the why. And so that's kind of how that whole piece came in. And so my daughter was a big part of that to start it. And, even to this day, she's been involved with various nuclear disarmament things with me. And I'm sure my mom is very pleased looking down that, she called us the 3 Ishikawa women. We could do anything, she said, and Ishikawa was her maiden name. So it just was really special for that.
Yeah. That's amazing. How wonderful too. She shared the whole story. Like you said, she's like, oh, I feel like it's time. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine, like she held that in, for so long. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you think, like, was it, as far as like, was it like, I know there's definitely, I know a lot about trauma, and how that's like really hard, or stigma or shame. Like, I wonder, like, what it was that, did she happen to share, like, kind of what?
Well, the interesting thing is when I think back now to my childhood and some of the scenes that I witnessed, when she would have this intense anger out of nowhere, and I didn't understand it because I was a child. And then she'd also have these times where it would be in August, but it could be other times of the year where she would just sit in a darkened room and just for the whole day and just be very depressed, and you really couldn't talk to her. And again, I didn't understand what was going on. My dad would just say, well, she needs some time. It really didn't dawn on me then. And she also had said to me that, and it's so true, and a lot of times with traumatic things, there's like a conspiracy of silence that you have within the generations. And my mom didn't want to talk about it for a couple of reasons, because when she went to Tokyo after the bombing, she went to go live with another family member. And she said whenever she told people she was from Hiroshima, they would like physically step back from her. And so she thought, well, they didn't understand radiation. They just thought, if you're next to you, I'm going to get sick. And then people would talk about if they are someone from Hiroshima or Nagasaki, then you don't want to marry them because they could have children with deformities or not be able to have children at all. So even within her own country at that point, she just decided, I'm just going to say I'm from Tokyo. She had to even go as far as kind of changing the way that she pronounced words, because every part of the country has dialects. And so Hiroshima was different from Tokyo's. And so she had to try to mask that so people would just go, oh, wait a minute, you're not really from Tokyo. And I feel so bad, especially these past few years as an adult looking back, of how she had to pretend to be someone else there. And then when she came to the States with my father, she had to pretend again because she faced so much prejudice coming in 1959. And she didn't expect it. It was 14 years later. She thought, I was the losing country, so maybe now it should be all, but it wasn't, and she felt she got a lot of racist remarks from even people in my father's family, and so it was very difficult for her. So I think the reasons why she just decided to not say anything. And it's very difficult too. She tried once to go to therapy for that. And this was, I must have been a child at that point. And when she talked about that she was in the atomic bombing, the person had said to her, well, the Japanese did drop a bomb on Pearl Harbor. And those are two separate awful things, but that doesn't justify the other. And she didn't go back, and she just felt, well, no one's going to want to really listen because of what happened prior to that. And that breaks my heart, thinking about that, trying to reach out, but then deciding, okay, then maybe it's right. I'm not supposed to reach out, and keep it in. And even more so that she then told me, all those years later, she finally did tell me stuff, and I feel really bad too, because part of it, she felt responsible for my disease, which is so not true. I don't blame her for that. She has no control over that. And to think of all the times that she's lived with those kind of feelings, it's just, it's heartbreaking. And then it ends up affecting, for me, I had issues emotionally too, because of what I witnessed, the way that she'd react to things. And I took it personally. And then when I had the disease, it's now living with me every day. So those scars stay with you. And when the people pass away, the Hibakusha pass away, it doesn't end, and it perpetuates. And my daughter had to see how I deal with things, and so she's had to deal with having a mother, since she was 4, that couldn't really walk without either a cane or a wheelchair at times, or in and out of the hospital. And so she saw my mother too, and she would talk about things about it, and that affected her as well. And you really don't notice that until after you've gone through it a little bit. And the more research that I went into about PTSD, of what she went through, and at that time when she was younger, there was no name for it. They didn't even think of it as a category possibility. And she just didn't know how to deal with those emotions. And she just kind of, kept everything down. And that is a very difficult thing. And I started to do the same thing as I got older. So I'm just going to push stuff down. And I'm trying now to be much better with that, but it's been hard, trying to deal with those issues. Yeah. I hope I answered your question. Okay. I may have gone off track.
No, you did. I think, as you described, like your mom's experience, I felt really sad and almost like lonely, where she got all these messages to not only not talk, but kind of like hide parts of her, and that must have felt so, so lonely. And just the responses she received from people too, like, the nonverbal, like stepping back, the verbal, and PTSD. I mean, yeah, back then, mental health, mental illness was not, and so, that's something more, I feel like, more recent, and more stuff is coming out. But so then it's like, okay, so you receive these messages to not say anything, to not talk, kind of hold things in. And then the unfortunate experience, which as a therapist, I cringed when he said that too, of, finally, I think I always think, like, to reach out for help, or to even, say something, to a professional, takes a lot of strength. And so your mom had also had a lot of strength to, like, okay, I'm going to, go. And then the response she received was just like similar version of what she had experienced before. So then it's like, I'm going to pull back in. So that's so, like, yeah, that's not very good. at all. I think
No.
that's a good thing for if there's any therapists listening, to like trauma informed, right? And what we say, how we say it. And speaking of PTSD, also like, intergenerational trauma, you may have even somebody younger, like in front of you, but really getting to know like the family, background and all that, because things are, passed down not just genetically, but just it's interesting how I think even some like PTSD symptoms can be
Mhm.
experienced, even though like the, quote unquote, like event happened like generations back. It's
Yes.
really, really interesting. So you never know, so that's something for all the therapists watching or listening or to be ones to keep in mind.
It's so true, and my mother also felt when she went to see that person, she's like, well, maybe she had somebody, that was killed there. And I think back and when I talk to students or I want them to understand that both of those events were horrible and they both need to be talked about and to know about the humanity underneath both of them, but you can't use it as a justification on either way. It should never be done. And I feel for her for that, and with the trauma. And I found myself after being ill and being in and out of the hospital so much within a short period of time back then, there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of anxiety attacks that I would have afterwards. Once being, when you're a patient for so long, not being able to do on your own, you're not independent, and I found, interestingly enough, it was 21 years ago, but then when I had my surgery and had some issues this year, it all started to come back, and the anxiety attacks are right at the surface again. And it's been a difficult time. And I think back to how she must have gone through those, but being young enough and not knowing everything about her, I had no way that I could help her. Like nobody really could help her. And, the funny thing of it though, is that she was very direct when she wanted something. She was determined to do it, and she had the strength for those things. And I wonder sometimes she might have overcompensated, really trying to be, okay, well, I can do everything myself. She learned English, when she got to the States, she became a citizen. She was determined, she worked for a company that did the electronic boards for Apollo 11 for NASA. And, so she was determined to try to make a life for herself and try to make a life for me when I finally came along, because she did have miscarriages before me. And it's just very interesting on how then she took her nationality of being Japanese, how she was proud of it. She'd talk about, like she'll mention things to me and she'd be very proud and she would tell me Japanese stories. But you wouldn't know it from our home. She really, other than the photo of her papa, there was nothing really that would show that she was Japanese. She wanted to have me not be picked on or have whatever those racist comments might have been. So she Americanized everything, but that, it didn't matter. I was the only Asian in elementary school for a couple of years anyway. So, I mean, there was no one in our neighborhood that looked like me. So it was still happening, and my mother was just so sad that it was happening again. And, for some of the same things that they would say, about the war or whatever. And, I know how much now that must have really hurt her, but she would always say she was proud of Japan, being Japanese, of her culture, but she never felt like she could fully have it out there. And so I didn't embrace that side of me for a very long time. Not until I had my daughter, did I realize that I really want to know more about the Japanese customs and the festivals and how things work. So my daughter, could have that. But that took a long time. I mean, I was 27 before I realized you can embrace your Japanese side. And that doesn't mean that you don't have your American side. You can have both. They can coexist. And I think for a long time, I just didn't think it could.
It sounds like looking back, like you kind of had put some of the pieces together, like as you found out more information, kind of looking back to and like, your mom kind of making these links and like, oh, wonder what that would have been like for her. Now that I'm, experiencing, I wonder, how she may have, felt, then,
Sure.
What was it like for you to just, as she shared more of her story and kind of filling in all these pieces, like, what was that like for you? And like, even reflecting on like your experience, like growing up.
At first, I was very shocked that she even wanted to talk about it. But then as she started to talk about that day, and I think what really gets to me, like when I was writing the book, when I read from the book, is the way that she would talk, and I can still hear her voice, and the way she kind of stare off like she was seeing it again, and she would just cry. And my mother was not one to cry in public. And it was like when she explained it, it was almost like she was 12. And just seeing all the horrible things that she saw. And I remember just being so moved to see her that way. And it broke my heart to think, she was 12 when she saw this, and then she had to pretend that it never happened. And, I only started thinking about a few days later after that, and how strong she had to be to get to where she was that day. I don't know if I could be that strong. And she would always tell me I was the strong one, but, I was just trying to channel into what she had, because to come to the country that dropped the bomb and to feel like you want to make peace and that there can be a way to get along. It was very hard to hear that story, to see her so, knowing it was the first time she was really talking about a lot of it. And at the same time, I felt so honored, that she would trust me with that. And, it was emotional for both of us. And I think in a way, I know it was cathartic for her, but it was cathartic for me because we could both, she showed me that, she'd finally cry over something that happened in the past, and that you can get some of that out and then move forward. And to want to share that with me, and then later to my daughter, so my daughter would hear from her saying these, her stories, it is so precious. And I think back to the childhood, as you were saying, and, as I'm researching for the second book that involves her PTSD issues, and I'm just like, oh my God, that's why she sat in the room. I thought she was mad at me. She wasn't mad at me. Or when she would have an odd, overly angry reaction over something that was very small, and I used to think, gosh, what a temper she has, but I get it. Now I know why. And we used to have this siren that would go off. It was a mill not too far from our house. It would go off every 7:30 for whatever reason. And every time that would go on, if I was near my mother, I'd see her because she'd be thinking, of the air raid sirens. And she also would get so angry if there was like a spot that would get on a blouse and she couldn't get it off, because she said when the black rain came, it just soiled everything. And she would try to scrub her shirt so hard as a child to get it off. It wouldn't come off. And so, I wouldn't think that things like that would trigger something. And now looking back, I get it. And I feel so bad, because now she's not here for me to say, I get it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Trauma is a lot, but I think, it's interesting with grief too. Like, even when people pass, like, you still have a relationship with them. It just looks a little different. And I think what you have been doing even before the book and doing all those speakings, like, that's a way for you to like keep her memory, going. And also it's in a way, to me, sounds like a way to still have that connection, with her, and so I think she does know, like you mentioned, maybe she's looking down on you, and you may not be able to say things to her right now, but through the things that you're doing right now, that's kind of in a way, I feel like, of doing that, which is huge because it's also to the world. I mean, everything that you're doing is like amazing, and like the impact that it's having on, like, past and even in future generations. And as you were describing, your experience and, everything you found out lately about, PTSD, and like kind of making those links. I wonder too, is it like, was that in a way part of like a healing, process, or to be able to like, oh, wow, like that, because I'm saying like, oh, I took things personal, I thought she was mad at me, but then like finding out the information, like you were like, oh wait, maybe it was because of that. Like, did that help kind of also like your own internal process with this?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it really did, because then I thought, okay, so that explains why she did X, Y, and Z. And so I don't have that, I'm not that child remembering it, the little one anymore. Now I'm like, okay, that's why she did it. And it's helped in my own therapy when I've been going to my therapist as I go through this. And then it kind of helps me to bring out those times where I was either so frightened or, because of her reaction to something. And now I can come to terms with that better, and to see her as a whole person is kind of how I'm able to do that now. And like you mentioned, it is, to me, I feel like, well, I am kind of visiting with her again, every time that I can talk about her. And the interesting thing, she gave me that strength with her stories all those years ago. But recently, in the issues of my anxiety attacks, my therapist had said to try to choose something that you love to do, but you can control whether you do it or not. Because right now, nothing is in my control of the illness. And so I chose to stop to talk to students again, to talk about my mother and about the book. So in that way, she's helping me again, even though she's not physically here, but her story and connecting with students and with other people about her story, so that's giving me a feeling of accomplishment again, or some way to know that some of the things I used to do, I can still do. And I love speaking with students. It's one of the best things that I do with them, and to hear their comments and to hear their thoughtful and compassionate questions that they have. It does bring a joy to me, and I think it is because she's also a part of it as well.
That's wonderful. That is so cool that you're speaking with students again too. That's really, really neat. Yeah. Was there anything I didn't ask about that you would like the listeners or viewers to know, or anything else you want to share?
Well, I think one of the things that when you mentioned that I'm on the advisory council for the International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma, and I actually met the person who who founded it and who still works there, is Dr. Daniele. And when I went to the UN, and she had come up to me because she has done a lot of work with second and third generations of Holocaust survivors. And she's done work with Japanese internment survivors, their second and third generations as well. And she wanted to do something for people who are involved with nuclear weapons. And one of the pieces of it would be the ones who the bomb was dropped on. And it's been very interesting in putting together these questions in this survey for people to kind of go through to see what kind of emotional feelings that the families now have. Because a lot of families, are unlucky. I've heard from some people that they never found out about their parents' experience in the atomic bombing. They just didn't want to talk about it. And now they're gone. And so it's so important of how, if people do have the story, to kind of keep them going. And to, I think, we're having what they call a meeting of state parties for the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in June. And I think it's so important that so many times when they talk about nuclear weapons, they do mention, the over 150,000 people that died from the atomic bombings, but they don't always mention the thousands that survived and the families they went on to have and the physical and emotional scars that they took with them. And I think part of the issues when you're talking about nuclear disarmament is there's, the statistics are good, the treaties are good, but I've found, I've been so lucky. I've been able to speak with thousands of students across the world, and they all tell me the one thing that really makes them want to stand up and take action is the story of that 12-year-old little girl, because it could be them. It could be their family. And I think sometimes the people who are in charge of these nuclear disarmament meetings forget the why we don't want them to happen. Because I really feel if we need to make that connection with the humanity. Because otherwise, it's been 77 years, so time has passed, but, that need for human connection is timeless. And I don't think we can lose that. So that's my biggest thing, is that I'm trying to bring more of the why into these type of meetings, because it's so important. If we lose the touch with the humanity, then I don't think a lot of people really think that it could happen to them. They can't see it that way unless they know, who it happened to and how similar they were. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is powerful, having a story, connection, and it helps definitely connect that humanity for sure. Yeah. But I have like one quick one.
Sure.
Since it has been some time since the book came out, have you, whether it was somebody like in person or email or social media, someone who read your book and reached out to you and said something that was really surprising or heartwarming or like, oh, kind of unexpected? Have you received like any particular like responses from a reader?
Yes, I have. And I love when I can get, sometimes students will send me thank you cards like snail mail, which I love, that old fashioned mail to get with these cards of how, some of them will be like, well, I never understood what happened over there. I didn't think of that damage that it could do. And so now they're more aware of it. I love the ones that then thank my mother, for sharing her story like that. And one time when I was doing in-person visits, a young girl came up to me and she wanted me to sign her book. And I asked her her name. She says, well, it's really Katerina, but I have to go by, I forget what name she was going by then. And she said, your book meant a lot to me. And she said, she was from one of the Eastern Bloc countries. And she said, um, she says, there's been war. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, you've lost some people. And she said, I lost a lot. But she said, your book and your mother showed me that something good can eventually come out of my life, that, and her strength. And she said how she was brave. And I'll tell you, I will never forget the face of that young girl and how she said that to me and then how she hugged me. And you hope that your book will touch people. But when you see that in person and somebody saying that to you over some words that you wrote over someone you love and find strength in it, it was so powerful to me. And, being an author sometimes is very lonely. You spend a lot of time behind the keyboard, or I like to use pen and paper. And, even with the pain that I'm going through, so I'm not able to do as much as I would like. But moments like that really make you feel, okay, I did something that will matter. You always want to try to make something matter. And I did it for her, and I can do that. It makes me feel very, very blessed, able to do that. Even though, with all that I'm going through now with the pain and, I feel that her strength, the way that she loved me and my daughter, it emboldens me to just push through this, and still continue to tell her story regardless of the pain and how the disease is progressing. So
I'm so glad you got to experience that in person too with that family.
yes, it was so special. So special.
And I'm excited about the next book. Yeah.
Yes, it's going to take place 5 years afterward. So we see a teenager now and how she's trying to deal with her family, new family, whether or not she makes friends, because she doesn't feel that she should, because of what she lost. And she deals with a lot of survivor guilt, which I was, the more that she had told me some of that stuff, and I looked at my older notes and reminded me of how awful, that she was trying to deal with, should I just stay alone? Should I make friends? And so I'm hoping that it will also give a piece of that, as well as the history of the Allied occupation, and the silencing about the atomic bombing and those issues. So I've been doing a lot of research. There's a first draft that's pretty much done, but it's still going to take some time. My illness kind of got in the way, but I'm really looking forward to having that out there and to see the character Yuriko being an older person and how she's trying to deal with everything that's happening in Tokyo at that point in time.
Yeah, I'm so excited. For the listeners and viewers, we all want to stay up to date. And also, if there's anybody that, wants to continue to find out more about you, where could they go? Is there like website, like social media?
Sure. If they go to www.kathleenburkinshaw.com, there's information there that will also give you a link to my blog, Creating Through the Pain, as well as contact sheet, so they can reach me there. And that goes directly to my personal email. And it'll take a few days, but I always do respond. The other thing would be on Twitter, I'm at KLBurkinshaw1, the number 1. And then on Facebook, I'm at author Kathleen Burkinshaw. And on Instagram, I'm at Kathleen Burkinshaw. So there are various ways that they could do that. And so it's been really wonderful being able to do this and to meet you. I've also had these wonderful meeting with other Asian authors. They formed the Asian Authors Association, and it's very wonderful to see what they're doing with that, so that we can bring out all of our stories. And it's people like you who show us that we can talk about these issues and we can embrace our nationality. We can embrace that and I just really appreciate, and I'm honored that you would have picked up my book and then got in contact with me like that and asked me on your show. So I thank you for doing that and for all you're doing for
Thank
us.
you. Thank you. Same. I will have all the link and then also social media. I'll put that in the show notes and on, the YouTube version of this episode for everyone.
Wonderful.
So please, click on it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on here. I'm like I said, super excited about the next one. So always welcome to come back and talk about that. But thank you for sharing, your mom's experience and then also yours. It does, mean a lot. I think as a reader, I became a late bloomer when it came to reading because growing up, I didn't have people like characters that I could resonate with or had any, and so, it's so amazing what's out there, and so I think what you do is super, super impactful. And you've even taken it a step further, from the book, so I very much appreciate that. So thank you so much. Yeah. All right. Well, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.